Hey, you're listening to the Intentional Documentary Podcast. So glad to have you. Around here, I'm gushing over the stories behind the pictures that we freaking love of our own lives. You know, the ones we hold as high value and iconic, because this is where photography meets real life. I'm your host, Marie Moss, and I believe that the best way to approach your photography is through your lens, your way. Through insightful conversations with photographers, I'll explore preserving life with your camera and using what lights you up to grow your brand. Let's get started. Hey there, I'm flying solo behind the mic today. I hope that you enjoyed the last 2 episodes with Justine and with Nick. I am shifting gears, I guess. In this episode, number 8 is Loosen Your Grip, and it's more of a mindset piece that I think that will apply. I think it'll apply to everybody. And then episode number 9 next week is Life Proof Your Business. So it's definitely more of a businessy piece. So before I shift gears into these topics, I don't want to lose sight of what we've covered already and want to invite you to ask me questions. I really want to hear from you so that I can explore the topics around preserving memories with your camera, or heck, even just seeing living memories and your values in a more clear, regular thing, not just when you're looking for them, but just literally having them like appear when you're not even thinking about them and you're in the thick of life, and how to make richer pictures of all of that for yourself, and if you're in business, for your clients. So feel free to reach out at Fearless and Framed over on Instagram, email me at marie@fearlessandframed.com, or utilize the review space to ask a question as well. Just please don't Facebook Messenger me because I don't check there at all. This episode was inspired because I was on the phone last week giving my total health history. The lady asked me, how do you cope with stress? I'm getting ready to have my second surgery for endometriosis. I'll spare you the whole history and all of that, but if endo is something that you're going through, feel free to reach out. I would love to connect with you. I've heard like my sister has this and that kind of a thing, but I haven't really spoke to anybody else going through it. So I'd love to connect. I'm really happy and open to sharing my story. I've got a unique case in that, TMI fellas, I had to have a hysterectomy during my son's birth because of a complication, and the process of that hysterectomy during a C-section is what gave me endo. It literally transplanted endo cells to my abdomen wall because remember, I had a hysterectomy. So like that is gone. All that stuff, all my girl parts there are gone. So this, now that having endo was just this crazy thing that popped up. It's pretty rare from what I understand. And I didn't have any endo symptoms prior. That is not why I needed the hysterectomy. So I joke that my son's birth is the gift that keeps on giving as I'm getting ready to have surgery number 2. The last surgery was last June 2017. By the time this is published, I'll be on the road to recovery from all of this. But anyway, all of that to say, her question was really geared towards my health and finances. But immediately when I responded, I felt like this was a good conversation to have here. My response to her was, I don't know, I just deal with it. I look at what's happening and I take one step forward. So I think I just really wanted to look at, okay, what does that process actually look like? And maybe it'll be something that's helpful to you. It sparked the idea to go deeper in dealing just with life popping up in all different areas, especially for those of us in businesses. It's so easy when lifey stuff is happening to then dismiss our business like it's not important because we've got all this other stuff going on. But what if you're like me and you're really ambitious and you genuinely care about your business? Like you want to protect that. So that's why next week I'm going to talk about life-proofing your business. But for this week, I want to just literally talk about some of the mindset things that we can do to help ourselves stay centered. I think that spinning a lot of plates at one time is personally one of my own superpowers or gifts or whatever you want to call it. I thrive with a lot going on. And frankly, I need to learn better how to do nothing and just letting my mind wander and relaxing, that is kind of difficult for me. So today I want to hold up a mirror to help you see or re-see your own get out of stress free powers. Guess that doesn't quite have the same ring as the get out of jail free card, but you know what I mean, right? So a quick disclaimer, I don't know what you're going through. I'm speaking very general here. Your own feelings are valid, and you can definitely, of course, like you don't even need my permission, like get the help that you need. But I am just here to share some of my own tools to managing my stress. Funny enough, when I started outlining this, it was after the kids' bedtime, and the stress was creeping in. My son started screaming for me, "Mommy, I need someone to cover me up." And he was just demanding, needy. He came out of his room, I swear, a half a dozen times. And I definitely wasn't feeling stress-free as I was going into this episode of how I become stress-free. So I really wanted to get this done so that I could record it the next morning with all the stuff going on. That was just one of my things that I really wanted to do. It was important to me. And he was just like poking this fork of stress at me through the whole thing. And I ended up just having to let it go. But anyway, just to give you a little backstory of what's going on with me, just for the sake of transparency, I'm working on batching the podcast. I'm working on launching the preservation project again, which will be the third time that this is ran. On Friday, today is Tuesday, but on Friday, our designer told me that she's not going to renew our contract. We've been working together for over 2 years, so she has been my crutch. So this means I have to find this other designer, and it needs to be before the end of June, the end of May. Otherwise, I'm out a designer. And then I need to get ready for this surgery, which is definitely going to take a couple weeks out of my regular schedule for the surgery itself and then recovery. And in that, I've had to find someone to watch my kids. We actually don't know anybody here in South Carolina, so that's been a little bit of a stressor, and in who's going to stay with my kids overnight. It's just kind of scary. And then packing, trying to make sure that meals are covered and that I've got the groceries for when I'm gone. And my husband's barely here because he works so many hours. We only have 1 weekend left before all of this goes down. The surgery just popped up last week, so I booked it 2 weeks before. I didn't think it was going to happen until September, so it's kind of this pop-up surprise. And we went into April with spring break and a visit from my in-laws, which trickled into the next week. And I had to, take them to the airport, which was great. I'm not complaining about any of that. And I'm just saying, I get these lifey things that happen as well. So on my mind is just all the to-dos. And the honest truth of it all is that there's more internal stuff going on. And when that's going on, it makes all these small things like having visitors and spring break and the fact that we moved here and I don't have a home internet service provider. Nobody covers here. So I have to work off of mobile hotspots, which is generally not that big of a deal. But in the last couple of weeks, I've barely been able to access the internet. It just hasn't been working. So I've been going to Starbucks a lot more, which is spending money on my chai tea lattes. And the kids are just fighting a lot. So when there's stuff going on internally, just amplifies all of that, The total honest truth is that when we moved over 6 months ago now, I guess really it was leading into the move. I would say August last year, it forged this path of barely working at all. My team was still working and my business was still there, but I wasn't showing up in my visionary role, mapping out all these pieces and bringing in revenue. So I've been spending more than I've been earning while I've been on this sort of extended vacation, if you will. So, it was intentional. I had stuff going on and I just kept choosing to be present for that. But now it is time to get to work and recover some of those expenses. And the good thing is that I've stepped towards this more aligned business model in the process. And I have never felt so good in my business than I do right now since just the content that I've shared so far in this podcast and in the preservation project definitely is a big piece of my heart. But it doesn't change the fact that I've got work to do to take these pieces into more of a revenue generation thing, because I think it was Kimra Luna, I may be totally wrong on that, but who calls like your quote unquote job that's not making any money a jobby. And I don't want to feel like I'm in a jobby right now. I want to get back to like my normal business mode, right? So I've got finances on my mind too. And it all feels like a lot. I get this pang of anxiousness. Like I've got a lot to do. I've got to go, go, go. But because of the tools, my mindset tools, like I'm choosing not to feel stressed out. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it definitely can creep in. I'm human, just like you. But as soon as it does, these mindset tools help me find my center again. And that's what I really want to share with you. So these are 5 synchronicities that I've noticed through working with others, whether that was one-on-one coaching or mastermind types of groups. And these experiences have instilled a thought process inside of me that, as much as I enjoy participating in those things and I'm an advocate for them, today I'm able to pivot and move forward quickly without any outside help. And I really want that for you. So they overlap a bit, but the subtle differences can be really powerful. Sometimes I journal them out. Sometimes I just think them out loud. So whatever type of person you are, go for it. But I want you to make this time for you. If you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed or anxious, grab a journal or a piece of paper and let's actually go through some of this stuff together. If you're good, then just listen through and bank these questions for when you need them later. But go ahead and just write down everything that's going on right now. What is your stress story? Like literally write it down. What's going on? Pause me while you do that. All right, so you should have a good picture, visualization of what's going on in your world right now. So let's dive into the questions. Number 1 is this a fact or a feeling? And you might have more than one thing going on there. So look at each thing with, is it a fact or a feeling? This is a question that I learned from Kyla Roma that I love going back to today. There's so many times when I was on the phone with her. She was my business strategist for about a year. And I'd be on the phone with her spouting off something going on about whatever. And she'd always stop me and say, Marie, is this a fact or is it a feeling? And sometimes things are facts and you just have to come up with an action plan to get over that obstacle. But so many times it was just a feeling. Now, I don't want to devalue your feelings by saying just a feeling, but you can adjust things. Like you have the power to make a choice. You are the boss per se, like a deadline, like how I had to get this outline done on Sunday night and my son was being my son and I had to just end up closing the laptop. Like that was the choice that I made in that moment so that Monday morning, even though I wanted to be recording Monday morning, I could start fresh with a clear mind and no interruptions to get this done. I mean, I know that's like a really simple example, but so often when it comes to what we're working on, and it doesn't even have to be like in our business, like it could be outside of business, we get this mindset of, I need to do this and it needs to happen this way. But a lot of times that's just a feeling. It's not a fact. So now I want you to just take a moment, go ahead and push pause so you can reflect on all the things that came up for you and ask, is it a fact or a feeling? All right, moving on to number 2. This one came from Nikki L.H. Brown because I had the pleasure of working with her in a friendship type of relationship and then also in her mastermind all of last year, 2017. And one of the things that she taught me to ask whenever I'm in my own like spinny head mode is, how can I simplify this? How can I make this easier? How can I make this fun? And more than that, it actually like trusting your gut there and experimenting. And like she says right on her podcast a lot, there's no one right way to do all the things, whether that's in lifey stuff or in business stuff. I was really inspired with her quote unquote launch process for a couple of her things last year that were like the total opposite of all the things that I put into a launch. I was definitely running this launch factory, and it was stressful. If there was one piece that didn't quite work, then I felt like the whole thing was a failure and all this stuff. So by following her lead in how can I simplify, man, it has just been amazing inside of my business. And just as a quick example to that, the preservation project, I went into that last June thinking, how can I launch this with the least amount of work? And I wasn't attached to like making a whole bunch of money on the other side. I didn't care how much I made. Like it wasn't like I was reliant on that revenue. So it was easy for me to just go into it with this, how can I make this the easiest possible? And I tried that, and it was amazing. And then I repeated the process and sprinkled in a few more things in October. And as I'm getting ready to launch that again, I'm just sprinkling in a few new things. And it's amazing. It's made the process so stress-free, because the other end of that, the Marie that I usually am, I'm like, well, I've got to have this many weeks of content, and I've got to do this webinar, and I've got to do this, and this. And when life happens, well, of course I'm like stressed out because I think that I have to do all this stuff. That's just not true. And these are business examples, but it's even true with offline things. Like, for example, I want to have meals ready for the sitter who is going to be overnight with my kids for 2 nights. I don't want her to have to worry about dinners. I don't want her to have to make Kendall's lunch. But like, that isn't the way that it has to be. I can let that go. I can delegate that to my husband. I don't have to be the one to do it. And I can leave money here for them to have pizza, and Kendall can have hot lunch. But like, that's been something that's in my brain. Like, well, I've got to make sure that I've got my meals planned and my groceries ordered and all the things. So go ahead and pause me and look at some of these things that are coming up for you and ask yourself, how can I simplify? All right, moving on to number 3. This one comes from Susan Ferraro, who I worked with a lot in 2017. I'm hoping to get her on the podcast. She has her own podcast that's the Easy Does It podcast. So these questions are really, they're what I learned in working with her, but she talks about them in one of her episodes that I'll link to in the show notes. It's really good. She started off, I think it was, I binged watched all of them all at once, so I might get some of my stories crossed, but I think this was the one that she was talking about a friend who was like, all this stuff is happening to me, like she was running late and lost her wallet or left her wallet at home, and she was like, why is this happening to me? So Suze, she is proposing the idea to reframe that question with, how do I feel and what does that mean? So think about the obstacles that are preventing you from getting to where you want to be right now. I know that a lot of us here in the US are coming out of winter, and up north there has been an insane amount of snow days and snow accumulation in general. Maybe it's sick kids. Maybe it's like my little Levi, who just wouldn't go to bed when I wanted to use some time to actually get some work done. Maybe it's this performance of what you're selling, or offering your products or services, and it's not bringing in the revenue that you need. Like, whatever it is, like, look at those obstacles. Right now, I'm feeling like all of these lifey things keep popping up at the most annoying timing, and when I'm trying to dive back into work mode. Like this right now, I want it to be a season of working because I've got summer in the front of my mind, and I don't want to be working my summer away. And I also don't want to see my finances get worse because, like I said, I've been kind of taking it easy the last 7-8 months. So I feel a little bit out of control with all these lifey things that keep popping up. I feel scared in that I don't want to reach a point where I can't pay my team, or that I've brought debt to my family. Don't worry, I'm not there. I'm not saying I'm broke, but I've just been tapping into my nest egg more than I'd like. That's really it. But what if it would mean, or what would it mean if all of these things were true? If those fears actually happened? So I looked at that. I've worked solo in my business before. I'd hate it, but I could do it again if I had to. My business is separate than my family's finances. And well, I do know how to make money when I need to. I've got assets built into my business to make money at any given time. Nikki has also taught me in the past, or not really so much me directly, but I've heard her speak to, if you need to make money, like make a list of all the ways that you can. And all of these things are just helping you focus on truths, just like I'm saying them out loud right now, in that I've worked on my business solo before. I can do it again. If my business finances go all crazy, at least they're separate from my personal finances. Yes, it would suck if I had no money in the bank and then all of a sudden my credit card was out of control and all this stuff. But what would that really mean about if that were true? Well, it just means that I owe some money. It doesn't mean really anything more than that. So I want you to see that it's not necessarily solving whatever obstacle. I mean, sometimes that it can be as simple as just a shift in how you approach things. For example, with Levi on Sunday night, I chose to close the laptop and start fresh. That was my obstacle. I made that choice to do something differently so that I could have the outcome that I wanted. It wasn't exactly how I initially wanted to do things, but it's what I had to do. But in some of these cases, if, that fear around losing my team or my finances getting so out of control that I can't keep up with them, sometimes it's so important to just dial down, what would happen if that were true? And just that little truth in, well, that would just mean that I'd have to do things on my own. And yeah, I'd owe a bunch of money and my phone's probably going to blow up from collection agencies. But other than that, it's, you know what I mean? I'll still have my health. I'll still have my kids. I'll still have my marriage. I think personally, and this may not be true for you, but just focusing on those truths, what's the worst that can happen, and then saying them out loud, I can work on my business solo again. My family's finances will be just fine. I'm already feeling centered and calm and more in control. So I know these are just really general examples, but I hope that you can look at your stuff and look at how you feel and what does that mean, and keep asking those questions. So you might ask those questions and just go one layer deep, but that might not be enough. That's one thing that Suze has taught me, is just to keep going until you find that root emotion. All right, so go ahead and pause me while you work on all of that and come back when you're ready. We just have 2 more left. Here's number 4. And this one just comes from my own self and my own process. And that's when I'm starting to feel stressed, anxious, in that go, go, go mode. I'll ask myself, what do I need right now? And narrow it down to that number one thing. So going back to my outline example, I was getting really frustrated that Levi wouldn't go to sleep. I wanted to get this outline done. So I asked myself, okay, well, why do I want to get this done? Why is it so important to me? I wanted to get it done, but what I really needed was peace of mind. I was so ahead on the podcast before spring break, and I didn't want to see all of that hard work and momentum disappear. So I wanted to keep up with that. So what I really needed was peace of mind that all of this is going to get done, that it's not going to slip away and get behind and I'm going to miss weeks and all that. And even that, going back to Suze's question, what would that mean if I missed a couple of episodes? When it all boils down to it, it's not that big of a deal. But because this is important to me, I knew that peace of mind was what I was really after. So instead of trying to work through it with a screaming kid in the background, I closed my laptop and I decided that the next best thing for me to get peace of mind was to sit down and look at all of the things that I'm trying to do right now. By doing this brain dump of all of this stuff, I was able to organize all the things that I really wanted to do. I could look at some of the things that I wanted to simplify. I could look at some of the things that I could just let go of. And then I looked at when the best time to do each thing was. So I have all these little I have a little legend of different letters that mean something, like K. If I put K next to something, that means it's something I can do when the kids are around. B means that is something I need to do when I'm at my best brain power, which typically has to do with writing or like recording and things like that. And I looked at all of that. What stuff I put what I is for internet. So these are things that I know that I'm going to tackle when I'm at Starbucks because I can use their super fast internet. So all of these things help me sort through my feelings and what's going on more in a tactical way so that what is on my plate feels doable. So by doing that one little thing, helped letting go of getting the outline done on Sunday night, like it totally relieved it. Plus, I vented to my husband a little bit, which is always recommended. Poor guy. But go ahead and pause me and ask yourself, like, is it like, so maybe it's just something coming up or it's something in your business or whatever it is. Ask yourself, okay, beyond that, what is it that I really need right now? Narrow that down. Do a brain dump of all the things that are on your plate and organize them, and then come back to me. Okay, we've reached the finish line just about. The last one is more of a relationship or interaction type of a thing, because most of what I've spoke to so far has been around circumstance. But what happens when someone's being an ass or your needs are being totally dismissed? So the question that I like to go to is, what's the perception? That's like the main hierarchy question. And there's some questions, some sub-questions inside of this that we'll get to. But just to give you a little bit of context, we just had someone treat us so rudely here at Fearless and Framed, acting like they were entitled over something that was, to us, really silly. And because there was no real inconvenience or repercussion on their end, and quite frankly, we didn't owe them anything. And then I've also mentioned a few times lately how I've experienced being bullied over my own thoughts around using your camera as a tool to preserve your memories, which basically boils down to being talked down to with that whole "you're wrong" mentality that we so often see in heated conversations that happen online. And then I've also had clients get mad that I wouldn't give them any of their raw files. This one lady didn't like her pictures because her hair was frizzy. Well, guess what? Her hair was frizzy in real life. So in these types of situations, these three questions really help. The first one is, why is this bothering me? And this actually came from Sue's. I'm going to link also in the show notes to another episode that she did that was about those heated online conversations and navigating through them. It was more geared towards politics, but the whole flow of the conversation that she speaks to is so beautiful that I think it would be really helpful here. And that was one of the things that she was saying is, all right, why is this bothering me? What if whatever they're saying is true? Why is this bothering me? So start with that. Go ahead and hit the pause button if you need to. The next one is, what could whatever this is mean about them? This one just kind of came from myself. And honestly, when one of the first times when I started asking this question was when I was taking my first steps in trying to document meaningful parts of people's lives. And I would say, I want to make meaningful pictures for you and things like that. And people would be like, oh yeah, I want to do that. But then they'd still get all overdressed and actually treat this like a photo session, which is not what I was trying to do. So what I started to identify was, okay, if they want to, put on this big production, that must mean that they don't quite understand my side, my perspective. And then the third question is, what can I do differently to avoid this the next time? So that, I think, speaks more to just maybe how you word things, or it could be how you just need better communication with your spouse because you said that you needed to have a few hours to get work done, but then they stayed home and still had the kids around and you couldn't get your work done, type of a thing, to just communicate a little bit better. So Those 3 questions again are, why is this bothering me? What could, whatever this is, fill in the blank, mean about them? And what can I do differently to avoid this next time? So these 3 things, these like coming up with these responses, they don't always fix the issue, but what it does is it helps me find more compassion to the other person rather than just being in reaction mode. And it can help me to choose to let it go or identify what boundary I need to set and then just get back to doing my thing, finding my center quickly. Remember that old adage, you don't know what you don't know. And I think it's easy to remember that. At least it is for me. I heard that once and it stuck. But just remember that the same goes for everybody else. Everyone has things that they don't know. So by being mindful of that, that really helps me make a game of identifying what I think their perception is so that I can meet them at their level. So again, Sue's had a great episode that speaks along these same lines that I think you should listen to if this is an area that you need a little extra with. And I'll link to it in the show notes. So you can go to fearlessandframed.com/008 to find all those links. So those are my 5 mindset techniques to just sort of stay as stress-free as possible. I find that I'm not someone who can let things go or just change the scenery, like just go out and go for a walk if I'm really in my headspace. Like that headspace will come with me on my walk. I have to face how I'm feeling dead on and sort those out. And then I can pivot with ease and with grace. I can reevaluate what's going on, decide what to do next, and shelf some things that I can come back to later when there's better timing. I can trust things will work out and be a bit more playful and experimental, like drawing from that inspiration from Nikki and just following that inspired action. So I hope that you got something out of this. I want to hear from you. If you did, hit me up, DM me at Fearless and Framed on Instagram or comment in the review area. Either way, let's look to the next step and move forward. Talk to you next week. Thank you to our podcast team for making the Intentional Documentary podcast possible. Our sound editor, Lucy Burgess, Minimag designer, Jillian Adriana, and our show notes manager, Ebony Rivera. Special thank you to our episode guests for openly sharing their insight. And thank you for listening, of course. Please hit the review tab to leave a rating. I'd love to read about your favorite episodes and what has really clicked for you. And remember, the only way to approach your photography is through your lens, your way. Photograph freely, and I'll see you next time. Visit fearlessandframed.com/intentional documentary podcast for this episode and all past episodes, show notes, and mini mags.